All right, here we go. John Reed Diginomica, man, I'm trying to catch my breath. Brian Dennett, what are we doing, man? We're at a show again.
Always, man. You are constantly on the hamster wheel.
Oh, man. Yeah, there was a lot going on. This is SAP Connect. We are the very last day. Couldn't find a really good location, so we're stuck in my hotel room at the Fontainebleau. Mixed reviews on the venue, but that's not why you're listening to this podcast. So we're not going to talk about logistics. We're going to talk about this really interesting event. And I was talking with SAP about this event ahead of time because I like the ambitious scope of the event. I liked that they're trying to bring line of business decision makers together across a range of areas. So this show incorporates a bunch of different other shows like Spend Connect and CX Live, and but also supply chain, Success Connect. Supply chain professionals for the first time have a show. That's pretty cool. Finance as well. I really like the ambition behind the show, and I want to talk a little bit more about like that as well. But one of the cool things about talking to Brian is that Brian, I think you had a really different approach to the show than I did, because I was mostly talking with customers and all of that, whereas you were chasing down a lot of partner angles, and the partner piece of this puzzle of how things are changing for SAP is really important. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, SAP has always kind of talked about how they need their partners, that they're never going to get everything done. And as they move in the direction of being more of a SaaS player, partners become all the more important. And I think the spirit of this event was highlighting that SAP wants to become more of a integrated suite. And so I think the nature of this event was trying to reflect that, trying to create better surface area for customers to see that, for SAP to kind of interact across the breadth, and for partners to start collaborating more effectively. And I think some of that we saw materialize in a very nice way.
yeah. And then also a lot of concerns and a lot of things that need work. And, when SAP talks about this so-called flywheel, which is clear they're going to stick with the flywheel. So folks, you got to brace the flywheel. And I loved how Mohammed Alam, who did a really good job, I thought, he even talks about the global maxima flywheel, because he wants to distinguish that between the localized flywheel of pseudo AI solutions, right? So this flywheel is essentially what SAP is describing there. Is SAP feels really strongly that it's got the best solution to modern business problems in terms of this end-to-end view of the enterprise, where data, largely powered by BDC, but data, AI applications and AI, embedded AI, and then core applications all become part of this flywheel. And the reason SAP is staking on this is because it's trying to say it's more than just applications. It's way more than just ERP, but it's also all of those things. So in other words, SaaS isn't dead, but we're not just SaaS either. We're all of this stuff together. And this is the case that SAP is trying to make, right? And in an end-to-end context, which is the focus of this show. And so it's an ambitious goal, but I think in the center of it is to be a trusted partner in all of this, right? SAP doesn't want to be the IBM of business applications 5 years from now, right?
Yeah. I think I hear you in terms of the trope that is the flywheel, but I do think a good way to think about it is, if you look at enterprise software, if you think about the idea of a flywheel through the lens of or the concept of momentum, I think momentum is not something you see a lot in enterprise software. Enterprise software is full of ready, set, stop, because you start to go down one path and then you hit the friction of, how do I integrate? How do I upgrade? I've run into some compatibility issues with my software. I've got change management issues. I've got security and governance issues. And so there's always a reason why you lose momentum in the enterprise. And I think the nature of how SAP is shepherding their product, the way that they're trying to build this kind of macro level view of the SAP landscape post-rise, I think they're trying to get to a place where customers can actually start to achieve some real momentum, that all the SAP technologies will play nicely together, all the right abstraction layers will be there, all the right glue will be there, these things all start working more elegantly with one another. And so you stop having those moments that inhibit your ability to continue to move faster. And I think that is a pretty drastic departure in the enterprise software operating model.
Yeah, and I want to get especially to the role of small partners in all of this, because I know that's important to you, and it's an important concept to me because I think the health of the ecosystem of any software ecosystem is dictated by that. And that's not been a strength of SAP's historically. But I think the thing I want to add to the mix is that you're talking about a world where it's a challenge opportunity thing, right? Where all software in a weird way suddenly becomes legacy in a world where there's no more black swan events. It's just a perpetual black swan world, right?
Yep.
And you need this much more, whatever buzzword you want to throw at it, right? Agile, resilient. You need a different type of system, right? And they talked some in this show about even sensing and reacting and using agentic technology to bring stuff to the attention of users proactively. But the whole point is that putting that aside, you need something that's much more nimble to the business circumstances that we face, both in terms of risk management, but also in terms of seizing opportunities when they are there, right?
For sure.
And so I think the way that ties into the partner conversation that I wanted to have with you today is partners have to go through a lot of business model change and come along for this ride, or this isn't going to happen. Like SAP's not going to deliver on this with the partners of 5 or 10 years ago. And so I think there's opportunities there for partners, but there's also disruption, right? And we see that in the professional services industry on a broad scale right now, with a lot of those services firms are not doing that well in the stock market right now. And there's a reason for that. And I think some of it is a little overhyped in terms of the impact of AI. But the point is, there's a lot of change happening, right? And your firm's in the middle of kind of making your way through those business models. So how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of change in services in general, I think. And then for the service partners specifically for SAP, I think reorienting themselves around what RISE represents, what a more SaaS-like SAP represents, I think there's legitimate challenges there. And I do think that there's material friction in terms of how partners participate and conform and get on board. And SAP's always dealt with this friction of the biggest partners obviously are important because they are the ones that really help to move the market. But the biggest partners are in many cases going to be the slowest to adapt. They're going to be the ones that are most hesitant to let go of the old business models, the old commercial constructs. And so there's a lot of just inherent friction that comes with that. And so one thing that we have tried to do as Lemongrass is really try and bifurcate what it is that's going on with customers. So you can look at all the functional changes, all the functional transformation that needs to happen, which there's numerous partners that go after that. All the big partners really focus on the functional side of things, but there's this whole technical story that has to happen alongside it. If you think about the old adage of SAP of everything is people, process, technology, I feel like we should be acknowledging that those things can be done in parallel swim lanes a little bit more often. So if you think about SAP's toolchain and how the toolchain gets used, how your processes get modeled, when does a process change because of functional reasons versus technical reasons? When can an agent show up? When can an automation show up? When can you displace a legacy technology? Those are not always functional discussions. Sometimes those are technical discussions.
Yep.
And so we are trying to figure out the right kind of collaborative model between us, the customer, SAP, and the functional partner to make sure that customers arrive at better end states around the landscape and around these architectures.
So in order to do this discussion right, we got to give you a couple of shameless plugs so that folks can understand how you're coming at this. So shameless plug number one, if you execute with your company, what does that look like for customers? What kind of difference are you making?
So our goal, as we have been kind of rebuilding the organization from the ground up, is to be there side by side with the customer through a transformation journey. And so we have an advisory org that we've been ramping up that is all about helping customers understand the commercial constructs of SAP, the changes in the operating and support models that come with modern SAP licenses, thinking through what is the right bill of material for a customer to leverage, making sure that they kind of check all the boxes in terms of understanding the new RACI that comes with RISE. So we help the customer kind of understand all that, demystify what that process looks like of going through that journey. And then once that process starts, we can chip in on the change management, the PMO, those kinds of functions as they're going through that transformation journey, infuse the technical architecture voice to make sure that those boxes are getting checked. And then we've got the BTP practice, we've got the BDC practice to make sure that those SAP adjacent technologies that are super foundational to a healthy landscape, to a healthy long-term strategy for the customer, that we show up strong in those areas and make sure that those things are addressed as first-class citizens, not as afterthoughts. And then the other piece that we're looking into is the AI component. So we've got an AI product that helps unpack what a clean core journey needs to look like, where there's code remediation efforts that may need to happen. But then we also are looking into what does the AI journey need to be for a customer. And I view it as, let's start with baby steps. Let's think about process automation. Let's figure out what the low-hanging fruit is, where the off-the-shelf opportunities are. How does a customer start to develop the awareness of identifying a good use case for AI? And then as they start to mature, then we can get more aggressive with how agentic do you want to get? How hard do you want to go with LLMs and Joule and things of that sort? You can ramp up to that stuff without feeling like you need to eat the elephants.
Yeah, and I won't go into this in too much detail, but I know a lot of customers are not moving as fast on this stuff as SAP is from the keynote stage, and there's a big readiness component to all of that. I want to get to some of that, but I can't resist making a snarky comment about RACI because I've been hammering SAP on RACI for a little while. And it was last year when I heard a bunch of customers kind of airing it out around this 50-plus page spreadsheet potentially,
Yes.
dividing responsibilities on RISE between the hyperscaler, SAP, and the customer. And I was just really trying to wrap my head on why hasn't SAP thrown all of their AI savvy at that process and reducing the friction of that. And I brought it up with SAP again this week. I haven't gotten a progress report. I know SAP is working on some stuff around that. Have you found that some of the friction of that is getting better, or is that still, because that just seems crazy to me.
I mean, it is a little crazy. And I mean, frankly, this is one of the first things that we, from an advisory perspective, really honed in on and made easier for customers. I think it is starting to improve a little bit. I think it's becoming a bit more sane. I think everyone's kind of gone through the cycles a couple times now. And so I think we've all gotten better at navigating it. But in terms of SAP really trying to take that burden off the customer, I don't know if I've seen anything really material show up there yet. And it is a headache. It is that R&R document is rough.
So that's my call out to vendors. And this is not just SAP that does this, but I think a lot of vendors, they don't always apply AI to the most friction areas in their organization of dealing with them. And they should, because I think that process can be improved. Because I can envision an interrogation with an AI type of agent saying, what is your situation? What is your company size? Blah, blah, blah. And pre-populating a lot of that stuff. And granted, you would still have to review it and all of that. But anyway, whatever. SAP, let's look for some good news on that in Tech Ed season, but we'll revisit that, I'm sure, down the road. I want to poke some holes in some of the narrative, but before we do that, I want to finish up on the SAP advantage, because you were telling me that you think SAP has a real potential advantage around the technical AI architecture. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So if you think about what SAP is represented basically for its 50 years of existence, right? It has been a system of record. It has housed many of the key processes. And because it effectively owns the process, it knows the user, it knows the persona, it knows what they should have access to, what they should not, the governance model. So all of those niceties that come with being the system of record suddenly become super foundational to how you think about deploying AI. Because if you think about just throwing an agent on top of an application or an entire platform, well, what should the agent have access to, and who is talking to that agent, and what access do they have? And so the layers of governance become very tricky to manage unless you already own those systems and own those governance models. And so from that perspective, there's a lot of things that are turnkey. And then separately, I think SAP, because they've been kind of marching down a pretty well thought out strategy for a number of years now, when you think about what BTP represents, this idea of a platform of innovation to kind of envelop the entire SAP suite, that has become incredibly foundational, a super useful asset in terms of enabling all of these AI technologies as they start to mature, as customers think about turning those things on more aggressively. And so if you think about what AI agents really are. It is an LLM that you bolt skills onto. And what are skills? Because I'm using now the AI parlance. And so if you think about what those skills are, in many cases, those skills are just a well-defined set of APIs that the agent knows they can call. And so who owns those APIs? SAP. Who now owns the agent potentially? SAP. Who owns the governance model? SAP. Who owns the data? SAP. Who owns the process? SAP. And so you can see how it all comes together very quickly, and they can be this huge enabler of these architectures. And the nice thing about the way that the industry is going is there are these protocols that are maturing, the agent-to-agent protocols, the MCP protocols. And so all these things are just making that stuff easier to expose. And SAP is keeping up to pace with these protocols. And so as these protocols mature and customers know how to understand and leverage those protocols, they'll be able to turn these things on the SAP side. And then all of a sudden, the entire landscape that they invested in will be AI friendly day one.
Got it. And I don't want to get sidetracked on this too much, but I think agent-to-agent protocols are going to be a lot harder than a lot of people realize, but I still like the work being done there. But I think that's going to be the hardest thing is agents from different vendors talking to each other. But anyway, we'll get back to that a little bit. But I also see another advantage, which is SAP sort of like this end-to-end thing that they're promoting at this conference, I think is really important. And we heard in the first keynote, which you should watch online if you can catch the replay, Heartland Dental, I thought had a really terrific segment in that keynote with Jan Gill talking about how they really latched on to end-to-end from the intelligent enterprise years. Hello, intelligent enterprise. The buzzword is back on stage. I don't think SAP planned that, but there it was. And that was when the light bulb went off for them that they need to start doing this work. And they've actually achieved a lot of success. And this is the point that I keep trying to make is that you can achieve a lot of success without bringing any BDC or agents into the pictures. Like if you get the software right, you can do this, but it's a lot of work organizationally. And I think it lays the groundwork for your AI discussions. And I'm very, very skeptical that you can just bring AI into a siloed, fragmented organization and get much of a result. So anyway, I think it's going to be interesting to see how right I am about that. We'll find out in the years to come. So I want to talk about your conference adventures. So you came here really looking into a couple things specifically, including BTP. What were you looking to learn and what did you get?
Well, I think, there is constantly the question of how does SAP want partners to step up and be the glue, fill in the gaps? Because BTP is the platform of innovation. SAP has been more honest in recent years about the fact that the LOB solutions will not solve 100% of use cases. And that's okay, right? There's an honesty there, which I think makes it easier for everyone in the ecosystem to participate effectively. And so it's always a question of when, where, how should BTP show up? How should BTP partners show up as a SI, as an ISV, to make sure that these gaps are being filled correctly? What are those best practices? Are the customers aware of it? Is there opportunity for partners to collaborate more together? That I think has been a big part of what I've been pursuing at this event is kind of hearing the take of the different stakeholders from the LOBs, from folks from the Grow team in terms of what is their vision and how partners, especially boutique partners, should show up. And I think another thing is the maturity of the tool chain. How should partners be helping to shepherd the adoption of the tool chain? Because the tool chain, I think, will become more and more important as you think about a unified suite and customers really start to think more holistically about those end-to-end processes. It's a different way to view these things when you start to break down those silos. And so how does the tool chain actually get deployed in a way to make that more manageable and make those cross-functional architectures and collaborations happen more organically?
And what is your sort of general verdict on where all of that stands based on what you learned this week?
I do think there's still work to be done. I think, frankly, there are areas of these transformations where the customers may be having to bear more burden, more cost than they should need to. I think there's still a lot of opportunity for more elegant tools to expedite some of these migrations, some of these transformations. I think some of it hyperscalers are trying to help with, some of it SAP is trying to help with, some of it the partners have to come up with these solutions, but it still feels like there's more that could be built to alleviate some of these things that we know are recurring patterns that numerous customers are going to hit as they go on these transformation journeys. And so that's a big part of what we are trying to unpack is where are there opportunities for us to develop accelerators to make the journey easier for these customers?
Yeah, I want to get into your accelerators in a little bit. I brought up Racy as one potential weak spot in a frictionless experience. Did you find one this week as an example or one that you've seen before that's coming up a lot for customers?
A weakness coming up for customers. I mean, I think one of the things that is still a challenge, and SAP probably did themselves a bit of a disservice here, is what are the real use cases? I think the keynote today did a better job of showcasing real opportunities where you can look in Signavio and see where there's a bottleneck, and then you can go into build and talk to Joule and add a new step. Like that is a cool slam dunk bite-sized use case that I think a lot of customers can relate to. Where if I look at the keynote from day one and some of the more grandiose, I've got a revenue problem, let me prompt Joule once and Joule's going to spit out an answer and now my revenue problem is solved. Like that's not realistic. And I think that's the kind of stuff that does a bit of a disservice to the customer in terms of thinking more realistically about how AI should be deployed and what kind of problems should get solved. I think there's still a gap there in terms of helping customers understand really what they should be pursuing, where they should be seeking out ROI, what kind of use cases are the right use cases. We should all be trying to get customers to be more tactical because there's a lot of hand waving going on in the AI space more generally.
One of my big themes, and not just for SAP, is I told another vendor partner leader recently, a pretty well-known company that SAP community members would recognize, but I said, like, I'm going to judge your partner health by the health of your smallest customers and your smallest partners, because I want to see how you've reduced the friction for them. And not only that, but I find so many times now that smaller partners with the domain experts and the ability to build IP are really making the biggest difference in my mind in terms of surfacing new approaches. And so that's the other piece why I'm so adamant about the smaller partners. And I'm always challenging vendors. I'm like, because one of them was like, oh, we had someone in Texas who built something specific to higher education and dealing with regulatory issues. And they really understood this one thing and they just nailed it. And I was like, why isn't that person on your keynote stage? You know, oh no, but Accenture or Deloitte or IBM, whatever, not to pick on those, but they're the ones that get the keynote time. And I'm like, if you would just showcase these people. And they're like, oh, well, we showcase them at our developer conference or whatever. And I'm like, that's not the same.
Yeah, it's not where the buyers are.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know when any of these vendors are going to wake up and realize that they got to put those people on stage and say, this is an example of, I mean, you give me a gut check, but that's my thing is I'm still looking for that from SAP and I haven't seen it yet.
No, I mean, you're spot on. This is something that SAP's always struggled with is they've never figured out how to put the spotlights on the smaller partners that are just a solid turnkey solution for a subset of customers. And I don't know what the ideal answer is. I mean, if I think about back in the day with TechEd and Demo Jam, that was a good opportunity for some companies to get up there and showcase something they built and get a ton of attention from a lot of people and start to build some buzz. But something like that needs to give. And I mean, even if you think outside of conferences, if you think about the SAP Salesforce,
right?
You look at the App Store is full of solutions that are all over the place. And yet we know there are these rock solid ISV partners that have built good solutions and they struggle to get attention. Most SAP sellers probably don't even know that they exist, even if they exist within the same industry. And this is something SAP still needs to figure out how to solve. There is a legitimate enablement challenge with their sales force, with their marketing force, and with their customers to know what partners are out there.
And I hear the objections coming as far as like, oh, the keynote time is so contested and we have only so much. And I understand how much has to go into these keynotes. But my counter would be, give me 5 minutes, and let me put 5 kick-ass partners on stage, and they'll take 1 minute and they'll show you something that blows your customer's mind that's super cool. And will it solve all the problems of the people in the audience? No, but it will give them a flavor of what's out there and the stuff that they're missing. It will make them curious. It will make them want to go on the App Store and learn more. So I'm sorry, but you have Rome in your keynote for 5 minutes for 5 partners. And do you think they can do it in 60 seconds? You bet your ass they can. They will seize that opportunity and they'll nail it.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Great idea.
Anyway, on we go. So Brian, we were going to talk a little bit about private and public cloud, and I really wanted to do that for a couple different reasons. This show isn't primarily really an ERP show per se, because it's all about sort of the suite, and there's a lot of focus on the various SaaS components of that. But the ERP backbone is obviously really, really important. And I find again and again that I keep coming back to public cloud because I just love the customer stories I hear from them. I do hear some good RISE stories, so I'm not going to say, and I'm using the old nomenclature. Like, obviously, it's all been churned up, now. But I'm talking about public versus private ERP. The private stories are interesting too, but they're more evolutionary stories, whereas some of the public cloud stories are just fantastic. And I really, really enjoyed writing at Sapphire, pushing people with a really good customer cloud story or two that were challenging other customers. Look at the public cloud, even if you're a large company, like, don't shy away from it and don't fall back into the habit that this is just a subsidiary play or something for your smaller subsidiaries or mid-market. So anyway, that's my vibe. But what is your take on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately it hasn't changed much from what you just stated. I think one of the issues that I'm seeing is if you think, and again, we go back to the tool chain. If you think about leveraging the tool chain, I think it is a question of when do you start leveraging the tool chain? When do you identify and start to map your processes as a customer as you're thinking about rise versus grow? And when do you have that moments where you look and you go, you know what? We're not that far off from being able to adopt the standard processes. We're not that far off from being able to adopt the standard data models. Maybe Greenfield is more approachable for us than we thought. I think it's very hard to find that window of opportunity and also have the tool chain in hand and have deployed it in a mature enough way where you can actually connect those dots and see whether or not there's a path there. And that's a piece of feedback that I've consistently given to SAP is they need to figure out how to pull forward the adoption of the tool chain far ahead of RISE so that customers can start to inform themselves on what is possible and which path actually is the best path for them. Because right now, for a large enterprise customer, the default is still going to be with RISE, and that shouldn't always be the default case.
Right. So any other thoughts on the show? Any high points, surprises, things that resonated or didn't?
I think one of the things, which is kind of a sleeper announcement from my perspective, I don't think a lot of people latched onto it the way that I have, but the Ariba rebuild. Ariba being completely rebuilt on BTP, being more AI-centric, I think that showcases a material investment from SAP. It shows a pace of change from SAP that is noteworthy. And if you think about SAP having this suite vision, if they really are going to start going down the path of finally taking all those LOB solutions that were acquired back in the day and start to really get those things onto the innovation platform, leveraging Fiori, all with the same kind of UX, the same underlying process mechanisms, all of a sudden, all this stuff should click together way more elegantly. And so you think about that flywheel and trying to eliminate the friction of getting these things to talk to each other correctly and having the unified data model. If they're about to start walking down the path of rebuilding all those LOBs in an upgrade safe way, where it's now all truly BTP built, that is a very different kind of SAP than the SAP we've known historically.
One really interesting moment from the show for me was in the executive QA for press and analysts with Sebastian Mohammed from the board. And I asked them a question that I've asked before, so they probably knew it was coming, but it was about access to innovation and because it's really hard to quarrel, I think, with SAP's overall vision. It's just a question of how do you get there in a way that works for your organization and includes non-SAP components and other priorities that you might have, right? But I said, like, when you're on an older release, you don't want to feel like you have to go through a big rise or grow initiative or whatever public, private cloud, whatever it is. You don't want to have to feel like you have to do all of that in order to start taking advantage of some of these newer products. And, in the last few years, SAP's really downplayed the BTP aspect of that, but BTP is one of the main ways that an older customer can really get started on some things. And I just want to see more of that, because with older customers that are taking their time because they're trying to figure out a bunch of different priorities, maybe they'll do a core ERP upgrade just to beat the maintenance deadline, but they're not necessarily thinking of SAP strategically at that point. And guess what? There's a whole bunch of AI providers out there that are happy to go in there and sell them AI stuff right now. Cohere will go in and put in an LLM for any customer. They don't care what version of SAP you're running on. So why would SAP want to turn that business away? And I think it's really more of in most cases, it's more of a messaging issue. It's more that SAP doesn't emphasize enough what you can do with BTP and what you can do with older release technology through BTP. And I'm seeing a little bit of a shift there. Like when I asked them about it, they were very much more vocal that you can get started today. You can use BTP for this. You don't have to. Maybe you can't use everything that a modern public cloud user can, but you can do a lot of stuff, right? And I think that's the right message, because let's get to work. Let's start doing cool shit now, like not later. And I really like that concept. And they also pointed out, and this gets back to your toolchain comment, that they're really working hard to also make that process easier, right? So it doesn't seem as daunting to really take on a transformation driven by an SAP modernization effort, or that's a core part of it. So I think it remains to be seen the progress there, but I think they have made some progress. And I think making it easier is also really big, because then it seems much more like, oh yeah, we can do this. Like this isn't like an endless 3-year thing like it used to be.
I completely agree with you. I talk a lot about on-ramps to RISE. And I think that the tool chain represents an interesting on-ramp. BTP definitely, I would say, is the best pre-RISE on-ramp, where if you think about something like integration suites, that is a proper, modern, competitive iPaaS that customers can buy into tomorrow. And if you think about SAP's strategy as an API-first strategy, integration suite is the API hub for the SAP landscape. And so you can adopt that tomorrow, and all of a sudden, you've got the cornerstone of your platform of innovation already there, already ready to go, and then you can build on top of it. You can start leveraging things like build and build process automation, and start to think about, how do I start extending in ways where my extensions are no regrets, that they'll persist through a RISE motion without a lot of friction. That's very doable. I think SAP has acknowledged they have not messaged that right. kind of story as tightly as they should. And I'm hoping that we start to see some more co-authored things between Lemongrass and SAP to really shine a light on those kinds of success stories.
Because what I would like to see is more of a, be our partner in innovation today, no matter what release you're on, let's get started. And to your point around partners, and there's a lot of great partners out there that can help with this, that are ready to make that happen for you today. Instead of, let's get going on RISE today, and RISE is your engine. It's like the RISE conversation can happen organically over time.
Yes.
But like, let's start partnering on innovation now, right?
Yes.
And I think that's a really, really different way of framing it. And I know partially why SAP doesn't want to do that is because there's a lot of market pressures on the other side around like cloud adoption numbers are big in the markets, and it helps SAP from a market valuation standpoint. But I really think in the long run, if you want to be a partner in innovation, you just get started now. You know what I mean? And so I think SAP is learning that, and I'm not expecting SAP to talk exactly like I do about it, but I think there's a middle ground, and they have to find that. And maybe this season at TechEd and stuff coming up, we'll see that. And I'll be at SAP Tech Connect, and maybe you will be too, and we can revisit some of that around TechEd season. Before we wrap, I just wanted to ask you specifically, shameless plug part 2, about a couple of your solutions that fit into this. So you have this BTP starter pack, so you get to plug this a little bit, because I want to understand why you built it and why you think it can help people.
Yeah, so for us, it's all about, to your point, how do you start the journey and start it in the easiest way possible? And so we are constantly looking at this through the lens of what is repeatable, what can be packaged as an accelerator of sorts to kick off the customer journey. And so the BTP starter pack is one of the ways that we do that. And with BTP, there is a lot of nuance in terms of deploying BTP with best practices, making sure that it is a sound foundation that you'll be able to innovate off of into the future. Getting identity management correct in BTP is something that we've seen done wrong when we've come in to existing accounts where that was previously set up. Getting integration suite appropriately set up, that's another one that's important to do. Starting to think about the build stack, even Cloud ALM. How does Cloud ALM fit into your landscape? Are you a solution manager customer? Have you started to think about where feature parity is and is not, and what you're going to do? If you're thinking about CI/CD, how is that going to fit into the landscape? So we have this a la carte menu around checking the right boxes to get you on that journey correctly, start to get some of those strategic assets for your platform of innovation to be in a healthy place as you look to start driving those real ROI friendly use cases, to start to think about your extension strategy, start to think about customization, start to think about pulling some of the technical debt outside of core ERP and housing it somewhere that's a little bit safer, a little bit more upgrade friendly. And we're looking to do the same thing on the BDC side of things. So how do you make sure that your entire BDC stack can be managed in a more elegant way, in a more seamless way, that there's healthy CI/CD infrastructure there to manage all of that? On the advisory side as well, it's again trying to make it more turnkey, trying to take that R&R documents and make it as quick and easy as possible to digest. That is the entire goal of how we're trying to go to market, is try and take these very critical junctions within the customer journey and make them as frictionless as possible.
And you're looking at doing this similar kind of thing for BDC. What kind of friction do you think you could reduce there?
Yeah, I mean if you think about the movement of the technical objects as you're doing work, I think there's still more to be done to make that an easier lift for customers. And that's why we talk a lot about CI/CD. We as an organization are really focused on the idea of infrastructure as code, trying to make it so all this can be managed, that it can be more bulletproof, that there's more visibility. It's easier to bolt on the approval processes. It's easier to see when things are breaking and can be rolled back. And so attaching that kind of philosophy to the transport mechanisms around BDC or around ERP or BTP and making sure that's all unified, that is something that we are constantly going after and trying to make as turnkey as possible for customers. And when you think about BDC, even though BDC is a new product, there's a lot of long-standing technologies that fall under that umbrella. And so if you think about something like embedded analytics, there's a tremendous amount of incredibly valuable analytics offerings that are already there, that the customer probably already owns, that's probably shelfware. And so helping the customer identify those things and turn those things on and starting to sweat those assets, those are the kinds of wins that we're trying to get customers to. And it helps to ratchet up that level of confidence, that level of understanding around what modern SAP is, so that they can think about what the next step is, what the next use case is that they should chase.
Yes, and so listeners know that I'm not in the business of doing endorsements for any partners, but I think what I wanted to get across with a couple of those segments there on the plugs was evaluate on your own, but just know that there's partners out there, a number of them that are worth looking at, that are going to help you reduce friction in different parts of this overall sort of evolution of where things are going, whether you want to call it transformation or just staying afloat in your industry or whatever the hell you want to call it. You can't sit on your butt right now. And I think there's some really valuable partners out there that can fill in some of those pieces. And so I wanted to get that out there. And thanks, Brian, for kind of sharing what you guys do.
Absolutely. Appreciate the chance.
So, yeah, I look forward to revisiting these themes in the Tech Ed season with you. But I thought we set up some of those Tech Ed discussions. We'll see if SAP can deliver. And now I got to stop your suffering, because we are basically on the equivalent of a hot tarmac right now, because I had to cut the air off in my hotel. So that's it. We're going to close now. I'm going to turn the air back on. But thanks for joining me, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
All right.